Have you ever discovered something that made you question everything you thought you knew about your family? "3 months ago, I found a hidden door in my grandmother's basement that changed my life forever. What I discovered behind it wasn't just shocking, it was impossible. And now that I know the truth, I can never look at my family the same way again. Some of you won't believe what I'm about to share, but I swear every word is true. I have to tell someone before it's too late. Before I delve into the horror I uncovered, you need to understand something about my grandmother, Margaret Blackwood. To the outside world, she was the epitome of grace and sophistication, a pillar of our small community in rural Massachusetts. Her Victorian mansion, perched on the outskirts of town, had been in our family for generations. She hosted the most elegant garden parties, ran the local historical society, and made the best apple pies anyone had ever tasted. Her silver hair was always perfectly styled, her clothes immaculate, and her manners impeccable. But there was something else about grandmother that people whispered about when they thought no one was listening. Something that didn't quite add up. You see, for as long as anyone could remember, Margaret Blackwood hadn't seemed to age a day. Sure, she looked like a woman in her early 60s, but she had looked exactly the same for as long as I could remember. Even in photographs from my mother's childhood, she appeared identical. Same silver hair, same piercing green eyes, same enigmatic smile that never quite reached those eyes. When people would comment on her ageless appearance, she would laugh it off with a wave of her perfectly manicured hand. "Good genes and clean living," she'd say, or "The secret is staying busy and keeping your mind sharp." Everyone would nod and smile, but I caught the questioning looks they exchanged when they thought she wasn't watching. I never questioned it myself until 3 months ago. Why would I? She was just Grandma Margaret, the woman who taught me to garden, who read me stories by the fire, who always seemed to know exactly what to say when life felt overwhelming. Even when things started happening that should have raised red flags, I ignored them. The strange deliveries that arrived only on new moons, the forbidden basement that no one was allowed to enter, the way neighborhood pets would disappear whenever she went on vacation with her sisters. Ah, yes, the sisters. That's another thing that never quite made sense. Grandmother had 3 sisters, or so we were told. Aunt Elizabeth, Aunt Catherine, and Aunt Marie. They would visit periodically throughout my childhood, though never at the same time. Each looked remarkably similar to my grandmother, which she attributed to strong family genes. But looking back now, I realize I never saw any of them age either. They would simply disappear. Move away, we were told. Gone to live in Europe or Asia or somewhere equally distant and vague. It wasn't until after grandmother's death that the true horror of our family legacy began to unfold. She passed away suddenly, or at least that's what we were told. Found in her bed one morning, peaceful as could be, they said. No autopsy was performed. She had left explicit instructions against it in her will. At the time, I thought nothing of it. She was old, after all, even if she didn't look it, and death comes for everyone eventually. Or so I thought. The task of clearing out her house fell to me. My mother couldn't bear to do it herself. She and grandmother had grown distant in recent years, though she would never say why. My older sister lived across the country with her own family, and my younger brother was serving overseas. Being between jobs and living nearby, I was the logical choice. The first few weeks were uneventful. I sorted through decades of accumulated belongings, boxing up clothes for donation and carefully wrapping family heirlooms for storage. Each room held memories. The parlour, where she taught me to play chess. The kitchen, where we baked cookies every Christmas. The library, where she would read me Gothic novels on rainy afternoons. Everything seemed normal, if tinged with the peculiar preservation that marked all of grandmother's possessions. Then came the basement. I'd avoided it at first, telling myself I was saving the heaviest work for last. But truth be told, something about that basement had always unsettled me. Even as a child, I'd hated going down there. The air felt different somehow, heavier, charged with something I couldn't name. Grandmother had always kept it locked, claiming it was for safety reasons. Old houses have their dangers, she would say, that cryptic smile playing across her lips. Best to keep some doors closed. But now I had the keys, all of them. A massive ring of ancient iron keys, each one tagged with neat labels in grandmother's precise handwriting. It took me nearly an hour to find the right one for the basement door. The lock fought me, as if reluctant to yield its secrets after so many years of faithful guardianship. The smell hit me first when I opened the door, a cloying sweetness underneath the expected mustiness, like rotting fruit and copper pennies. The wooden stairs creaked ominously under my feet as I descended, my flashlight beam dancing across cobweb-draped walls. The electrical switch by the stairs did nothing when I flicked it, so I had to rely on the flashlight's uncertain illumination. The basement was larger than I expected, extending well beyond the foundation of the house above. Stone walls lined with metal shelving units created a maze-like series of corridors, each packed with boxes and trunks and things draped in dusty sheets. But it was the far corner that drew my attention. Specifically, the massive shelving unit that seemed just slightly out of place compared to the others. I might never have noticed if I hadn't dropped my flashlight. As I bent to retrieve it, the beam caught the bottom of that shelf unit at an odd angle, revealing scratch marks on the floor. Not the random scratches you might expect from moving furniture, but regular curved marks, like the shelf had been pulled away from the wall repeatedly. It took all my strength to move it, the metal groaning in protest as I pushed. Behind it, partially hidden behind a false panel of stone, was the door. Not a normal door. This was something ancient, made of dark wood, that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Symbols were carved into its surface in intricate patterns, symbols that made my eyes hurt if I looked at them too long. They seemed to shift and change when viewed from different angles, forming new patterns that whispered meanings I couldn't and didn't want to understand. The lock was massive, a thing of black iron that looked as old as the house itself. None of grandmother's keys fit it, but after some searching, I found a rusted crowbar among the tools upstairs. The lock put up a fight, but eventually gave way with a sound like a dying animal. I should have stopped there. Everything in my body was screaming at me to close the door, replace the shelf, and forget what I'd found. But curiosity has always been my curse, and family secrets have a way of demanding to be uncovered, no matter the cost. The narrow staircase behind the door led down into darkness. The air grew colder with each step, and that sickly sweet smell became stronger. My flashlight beam revealed rough stone walls that glistened with moisture, despite the house being nowhere near any natural water source. The room at the bottom was small, maybe 12 feet square, with a ceiling so low I had to stoop slightly. A single bare bulb hung from a chain, and to my surprise, it still worked when I pulled the dangling cord. The harsh light revealed dozens of leather-bound journals arranged neatly on metal shelves, each one labelled with dates spanning back to 1943. But it was the table in the centre of the room that drew my attention. Made of dark wood, Its surface was deeply stained and carved with more of those unsettling symbols. Strange channels had been cut into its surface, all leading to a central drain. I didn't want to think about what had flowed through those channels. The journals were written in my grandmother's distinctive hand, though the earliest ones showed slight variations in the writing style. They detailed experiments, horrific, impossible experiments, that made my blood run cold. The first entry, dated June 15th, 1943, described a discovery made during the darkest days of World War II. "Success at last," she wrote. "The formula requires refinement, but the basic principle is sound. Human sacrifice alone is insufficient. It must be willing, or at least from one's own bloodline. The transfer of life force is directly proportional to the strength of the blood connection. Sisters are ideal, but daughters would work even better. Must investigate further." The entries that followed documented her refinements in clinical detail. The rituals she developed, the sacrifices she made, the way she discovered to create perfect duplicates of herself, each one lasting about 20 years before requiring replacement. She called them her sisters, but they were her, copies created through some horrible amalgamation of ancient magic and modern science. Photographs were tucked between the journal pages, yellowed with age but unmistakably clear. My grandmother, looking exactly the same in every image, decade after decade. Sometimes she posed with her sisters, identical women at different stages of the same horrible cycle. Each new copy would be created, live out its purpose, and then be disposed of when the time came for renewal. The dates aligned perfectly with family stories about the aunts who kept moving away. Every time someone started asking questions about her ageless appearance, she would simply become her own successor, while the previous version vanished into the basement's hidden room. But the later journals revealed something had gone wrong. The entries became increasingly erratic, filled with paranoid ramblings about weakening bloodlines and diluted power. The sacrifices were becoming less effective, requiring more frequent renewals. The last entry, dated just 2 weeks before her death, spoke of preparing for another transition. "The power wanes," she wrote, her usually neat handwriting shaky and distorted. "Each renewal requires more energy, more blood, more life force. The latest vessel shows signs of rejection already. Perhaps Clara's daughter would be suitable for the next iteration." Clara is my mother's name. The implications of that last entry hit me like a physical blow. She had been planning to use me. All those years of special attention, all the time she spent teaching me family history and ancient languages. She had been grooming me as her next vessel. But something had gone wrong. The ritual had failed, and death, real death, had finally claimed her. Or had it? Because lately, I've started noticing changes in myself. My reflection seems different somehow, like my features are slowly shifting to match old photographs of her. My handwriting has begun to mirror her precise style. I've started craving foods I never liked before, the same foods she always favoured. And the dreams. God, the dreams. Every night, I see myself standing at that table in the basement, understanding the symbols that had previously made my eyes hurt. I know exactly how to use them now, know exactly what sacrifices would be needed to continue the cycle. The worst part. A part of me wants to try. There's a hunger growing inside me, a darkness that whispers about power and immortality and the strength of blood ties. Sometimes I catch myself making lists of potential sacrifices, distant relatives whose disappearances wouldn't raise too many questions. I've started calculating bloodline connections and energy transfer ratios in my sleep. I found more journals hidden in the walls, older ones, dating back centuries. The Blackwood women have been doing this since colonial times, passing down their terrible knowledge from generation to generation. My grandmother wasn't the first. She was just one link in a chain of horror that stretches back hundreds of years. The townspeople's whispers about our family suddenly make more sense now. The legends about Blackwood women never growing old, about mysterious disappearances and strange lights in the basement windows on moonless nights. They knew, on some level. They had to have known. But in small towns, some secrets are better left unspoken. I should destroy it all. Burn the journals, seal the room, erase every trace of this abomination. But I can't bring myself to do it. The knowledge calls to me, a siren song of power and immortality written in blood and darkness. Every day the temptation grows stronger. This morning I caught myself shopping for supplies, things mentioned in the earliest journals as essential for the ritual. Black candles, silver bowls, special herbs that only grow in graveyards at midnight. My hands knew exactly what to pick, exactly how much I would need. I've started making excuses to invite distant relatives to visit. That's why I'm sharing this story now. Consider it both a confession and a warning. Look closely at your family history. Study those old photographs. Ask questions about relatives who vanished without explanation. Because sometimes the most terrifying monsters aren't hiding under your bed or lurking in dark alleys. They're sitting at your dinner table, passing you the mashed potatoes and smiling with teeth that have been sharp for centuries. Pay attention to the women in your family who never seem to age. Watch for identical sisters who never appear in the same place at the same time. And if you notice yourself starting to change, starting to resemble a dead relative more and more each day, run. Run far and run fast. But most importantly, stay away from old basements. Don't go looking behind hidden doors or examining strange symbols carved into ancient wood. Some knowledge is meant to stay buried, some doors are meant to stay locked, and some family traditions are better left unobserved. Because once you know the truth, you can never unknow it. And sometimes the truth has a hunger all its own. I have to go now. The moon is nearly new, and I need to make preparations. I've already said too much, but perhaps this warning will help someone else avoid my fate. Or perhaps one of you out there shares my bloodline, and you'll recognize the call of power when you hear it. After all, family traditions are important, aren't they? Don't forget to like and subscribe if you want to hear more dark family secrets, though I can't guarantee I'll still be myself by the time I post again. The basement is calling, and I've finally stopped trying to resist. And remember to check your basements carefully. You never know what might be checking you back.